Welcome to the episode. I'm Dr. Armin Feldman, and as always, I'm here with my friend, colleague, and partner in Physicians Legal Consultants, Dr. Mike Bummer.
Hi, everyone, and hello to you, Armin. We're back on another video podcast episode today. For those of you listening on Google Play or iTunes, we appreciate you, and don't forget to click that subscribe button if you like the episodes and want to get notified of new ones. You can find us on YouTube, and yeah, we're happy to be here doing video again, and this has been a really fun journey. Well, how long have we been doing this now, Armin?
Well, this actually is a special episode in a way. First of all, it's our last episode of the year. It's right before Christmas, and we thought, and it's our 40th. It's our 40th episode.
That's amazing. And we started, I think, the end of last summer. So I think we're going on a year and a half of producing this content. And it's really been, I already said the word journey, and that kind of is a little bit of a spoiler for what we're going to talk about today as part of our
Right.
40th episode, is where this whole concept of medical legal consulting work, not expert work, not expert witness work, but medical legal consulting for personal injury attorneys, workers' comp attorneys, and medical malpractice attorneys, how it was born and how you really kind of founded this area of forensic medicine.
Great. Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit of a different episode, but we discussed it and thought that our viewers and our listeners might like to hear the origin story, right? And see how this whole thing was founded, and to do something a little out of the ordinary as our Christmas special.
What do they say? Necessity is the mother of
Mm.
invention.
Yes.
And to learn, I think, where and how you gave birth to this type of consulting through today's episode, I think our listeners, both attorneys and physicians alike, will better understand where it fits potentially in their workflow, in their day-to-day life to maximize their case values, and how medical legal consultants can affordably help on all aspects of their medical cases. And so I think that, why don't you start by telling us what your life was before you did any of this? I mean, before this consulting work was even a thought in your brain.
Okay, will do. Also, Mike, I just want to throw in not only for our attorney listeners, our physician listeners, but we know that there are listeners all over the country and actually all over the world that don't meet those two categories that listen as well. So, and that's kind of thrilling in and of itself. But to answer your question, I was trained as a psychiatrist, went to medical school at the University of Wisconsin, and then came out to Colorado and went to the Colorado Health Sciences Center, and I did an internship in internal medicine, and then I started my psychiatry residency. And after I finished that, I then went on for 5 years actually on Friday afternoons and Saturday mornings. And I became a student at the Denver Institute for Psychoanalysis. And so when all of that was done, I was a practicing psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. So I had a general practice when I started,
Mm-hmm.
and I had some patients in psychoanalysis. And that's what I was doing before there was ever a glimmer in my eye about what I was going to be doing next.
All right. So then what about the second half of that clinical career? What was right before you had the concept of helping attorneys with their
Yeah.
cases?
So what happened was when I was, a relative whippersnapper, getting started in my private practice, I met a guy about my age who uh, was and is a personal injury attorney. And at that time, I was just getting my feet wet in my practice. And he actually was an associate in somebody else's firm. And I met him probably a couple of years before he started his own firm, which, by the way, became one of the biggest and most respected personal injury firms in the state of Colorado.
Hmm.
And so his name also is Mike. And by the way, we've known each other, I think it's going on 40 years now.
Okay. All
So
right.
um, Mike, the attorney, he started sending me his cases. And specifically, he started sending me a lot of cases where there were head injuries.
Okay.
And I started working. I was pretty much working just exclusively with his cases until the word spread in our community, and I started working for a whole number of attorneys on head injury cases. In fact, I had attorneys, other physicians, chiropractors, physical therapists, and so forth sending in head injury cases, trauma cases.
And being more specific, I believe you're referencing that you were reviewing records like we do now. You were talking to the client and then writing opinion reports. You weren't
Right.
actually like performing IMEs and things like that.
Well, I was doing a lot of expert witness work.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And the my practice got so busy, I kind of fell in, and it was kind of accidental, but I kind of fell in. And my specialty for years and years really was mild traumatic brain injury.
Okay.
And what that led to was I started opening clinics. And of course, the first clinic was in Denver. And I had, when it was up and running and going strong, I had other psychiatrists, psychologists, neuropsychologists, psychotherapists, biofeedback therapists, and others working at the clinic. And I will say, I think we did a great job of doing our best and helping head injured individuals get back up on their feet, whether that was through an auto accident, uh, some other things that were strange. I'll never forget the case of the guy that worked installing cable TV who loved golf and was on the golf course and was smacked with a golf ball that probably traveled a couple hundred yards, hit him right in the temple, and he had such severe problems. Nice guy, young guy with a young family, and he never fully recovered, and that's why I remember him so well. And but we did all kinds of traumatic head injury cases. So once that was up and running, the guy that was the head psychologist for the clinic also had a background in business and actually had a degree in business administration. So I thought, well, let's open another clinic.
Okay.
And the next clinic was in Colorado Springs, and that one took off. Then the next clinic was in Detroit. And the reason it was in Detroit is at that time in Colorado, we had no fault insurance. So we were working off of that model. And so Michigan had very similar laws when it came to what happens in auto accidents. And so the next clinic was in Detroit. And actually, for that very first one that was out of state, the psychologist I mentioned, Jim and I, we rented an office in the old Chrysler building at 10 Mile and Southfield in Detroit, for those of you that know that. And we found an apartment in walking. We rented an apartment for a year within walking distance to this building. And Jim and I traded off every other week being in Detroit for that year until that was running smoothly. Well, I don't want to talk about too much.
Yeah,
about
how many clinics did you ultimately
they
have?
were all over the country.
So how many roughly?
20.
Okay, so then you had 20 clinics and this was obviously very successful. So then how do you connect that to medical legal consulting?
Well, I was very fortunate. I was able to sell that company.
Okay.
And obviously, once that company was sold, I worked for them for a short period of time. But then I was out of a job, right?
Okay.
I was literally not doing anything at that point. So I thought, well, what should I do next? And I thought, well, based on my experience over all these years, maybe what I could do is just consult on any kind of medical question that came up in a case. And that was the start of medical legal consulting, of what we're doing, of the training program that I have, and so forth. So at that point, I did talk to my friend Mike, and I said, "What do you think of this idea?" And he was very encouraging. And so I knew I was going to be working pre-trial, pre-litigation. I was not going to be working as a medical expert, but rather, and I coined the term, I was going to be working as a medical legal consultant on those approximate, in these areas of law, personal injury and workers' comp, on those approximately 8 or 9 out of 10 cases that are negotiated and settled.
How do you
So,
bridge then at that point going from head injuries to all facets of personal injury work? And as we now have, our volume is primarily car crashes and slips and falls and orthopedic injuries, or mood disorders and various medical ailments. How did that bridge? Was that just very natural, or was there some difficulty doing that?
yeah, well, there was some difficulty, which I can talk about, but here's the thing. The way our legal system works across the country, uh, physicians, MDs, and DOs are sanctioned to give medical opinions. Now, if a case can't get settled and the case is going to go to trial, well, then the attorney, or administrative hearing in a workers' comp case, then the attorney is going to need medical experts in every area of injury. But the way our system works, for the purpose of negotiating and settling the case,
Mm.
what the attorney needs are well reasoned, well thought out medical opinions, which, Mike, in and of
Hmm.
themselves act as evidence, but that are backed up by evidence from the medical literature. Probably in 80% of our cases, we're writing a report, but we have sometimes we're not. We have services that we provide that don't require a report. But we are helping those attorneys to better negotiate and settle the case, to help raise the settlement amount, to save the attorney time, to help the injured person, the client of the attorney, get the appropriate medical care for their clients, and to help the attorneys better understand the medicine in their cases. Now, obviously, they work with a lot of medical issues, and we know that they are very good. But as we've mentioned before, they're not physicians, so but they can have a physician on their team. So let me tell you a quick story. So when I started, um, well, first of all, I didn't know exactly what kind of consults I was going to be doing, right? And I developed this this broad group of services based on my interaction with attorneys and learning more about the field. And some of these services came naturally. Some of them I actually kind of thought up and developed. Um, but when I started, very early on, I had a case. It was a rotator cuff injury case, and there was some issue about whether this person should be afforded a revision surgery. So I do what we always do. I talk to the attorney. I read the medical records. I interviewed the client of the attorney, and then the key is I went to the medical literature and found. I developed my own opinions on the case, and then went to the medical literature, and also in this particular situation, went to an IME, observed the IME, and read the IME report when it came out. So my opinion was different than the IME doctor, and after I wrote my report, the attorney sent it over to opposing counsel. Well, opposing counsel called my attorney and said, "Why should I pay any attention to Dr. Feldman's report? He's not an expert in rotator cuff injuries." And the attorney was smart enough to say, "Well, Dr. Feldman works as a medical consultant for me in all my cases. And if we can't get this settled on the basis of his opinions, how he backed those opinions up in his report. And we can't get that in the issue resolved in the settlement, and we go to trial. When I hire my retained orthopedic expert, they're going to say exactly what Dr. Feldman said in his report. In fact, they were both relying on the same literature. So let's get this settled.
That's exactly right. I mean, that right there is so important, that this report that our most common deliverable is, are these 7 to 15 page reports that we call comprehensive medical summary reports, that pull in all of this information from these cases and injuries, functional losses. We include all the things you just mentioned. And those reports really serve as that ammunition, that firepower, that foundational edge for the negotiation to settle cases. Because you've learned in doing this that 9 out of 10 cases, in fact, do settle.
Right.
And it's just wild how that really, came to fruition from you simply just helping on the various medical aspects of cases.
Right. So I can tell you something else. It wasn't without some adversity, right? Because, one nice thing happened, and you know this story, but I went out to do my very first initial meeting with a couple of attorneys. They were partners in the firm, and the firm happened to be in Boulder. And this was my very first one. I didn't have a script. I hadn't really completely thought out I obviously thought about it, but hadn't completely thought out what I was going to say. I didn't have this cadre of like 15 or 16 different services that I could offer them like we do now, that are very specific services to help these attorneys. And I showed up at their office, and we sat down in their conference room and talked. And of all things, I walked out with 2 files. One file in each hand, right? And sometimes, as you know, Mike, I wonder if that hadn't happened, would we be doing this podcast? Would I have trained at this point?
I doubt it.
Over 1,600 physicians around the country? Would there be physicians all over the country doing this? One of the great gratifying things for me is I know that I may have trained somebody in, say, Las Vegas, and they're working on a case. That injured person doesn't know me from Adam, but I know that through this whole experience and my experience in training that person, that injured person is getting help that they desperately need, and they wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
That's right. We talked about this in an episode recently, how medical legal consultants, as you've trained us, because I'm one of the pupils, right, is really its own language and art. A lot of doctors, most doctors have the credentials to give these opinions, but the way and fashion that it's done, the way that reports are composed, you've really honed that skill from doing thousands of these reports over the last 16 years.
Yes, yeah, and it's really become now a new subspecialty of forensic medicine, which is quite gratifying. But when I said I had adversity, attorneys were not using physicians, and certainly not using medical legal consultants in the way that we practice now.
I would argue that less than 5% of attorneys that I interact with, new attorneys, are even aware that this is a strategy for them to increase their settlements. Would you agree?
I would agree. And if I can say this, I think we're making the old way of doing things obsolete.
I totally agree. Because it's also the affordability of medical legal consultants and the timeliness, meaning turnaround time typically being 10 to 14 days, affordability being a fraction of what medical experts charge, and more of a collaborative nature than a, what do you think about this, and here, send a big retainer check.
Right. So I was doing this for about 2 years, and I was really honing it during that time period. Not all, but most of the services that we offer today, I developed over that 2-year period. Like IME observation and writing IME rebuttal reports, doing liaison work between attorneys and treating doctors, helping attorneys to develop questions for experts in deposition and at trial, a whole bunch of things. So then I was actually out to tell you this story too. I don't think you know this one, but my wife Holly and I are very closest friends. He's a personal injury attorney, and his wife is the office manager and one of the paralegals for his practice. And the four of us have traveled all over, but we happened to be the four of us in Aspen in the summertime. We were walking the Rio Grande Trail next to the Roaring Fork River. And don't ask me how, but all of a sudden it popped into my mind, hey, I could train other doctors to do this.
Yes.
And that it kind of preoccupied me during that walk. And when we got back from vacation, I got out, I probably did it on a computer, but I got out pen and paper and I started writing it down. And that led to the medical legal consulting coaching program, a training program for physicians that want to learn how to do this. And that includes the one-on-one training that I do. And then I started doing live conferences once a year we had, on average, we had 150, 175 physicians turn up for a 2-day crash course training. The first couple were in Las Vegas because I wasn't certain anybody was interested in me, but they might be interested in Las Vegas. Next one was in Chicago, and then we started doing them in Denver.
How many total conferences did you have?
Well, we did 8 right up until the pandemic.
Okay.
Then once the pandemic hit, we did a couple of years, did the conference by live stream, turned our living room into a temporary TV studio. And now the course is online, changing with the times, right? But as I mentioned, over the years, I've trained a little over 1,600 physicians. I mean, not all of them stuck with it, right?
Sure.
But there are doctors all over the country doing this. And of course, that's how I got the great opportunity to meet you. And so it was 4 or 5 years ago that you went through the training. And I think, Mike, isn't it true that you didn't go to a live conference? You wound up having to go to the first live stream conference.
That's right. I was so excited to come out, but the conference was scheduled to be held in April or early May of 2020.
Right.
And we don't have to tell anyone what happened in March of 2020, and it ruined a lot of travel plans. And I remember you sharing that you were pulling your hair out because it was just such a mess having an event like that with everything booked and paid for. And I had started coaching program with you in that previous November. And so I was well on my way and excited to network and meet all of the other people that were doing this work. And it didn't happen, but what was really cool was my first, 5 or 10 meetings that I had was seeing the attorneys' light bulbs go on over their head when I showed them the redacted reports, which we should mention that if anyone wants to see a redacted version of these reports, you can email us at comments@physicianshelpingattorneys.com, or even look below in the comments. We're going to put a link to schedule a phone call or a Zoom meeting, or just visit our website to learn more. But the attorneys had light bulbs going off, and I could see them as they read the reports and said, wait, you can do this, and wait, how much do you charge? And you could have this done in a few weeks. And it was like, yeah, this is. And they asked, well, where did you learn how to do this? I said, oh, there's this old crazy guy. And no, I said, oh, there's this doctor who really, put the effort in and has been doing this for over 10 years. And he's taught me how to do this, without a law degree, but to, as a doctor, put a lot of these important parts of this report together. Yeah. And so that was really fun for me to see the light bulbs going on. And I realized then that it was a path toward a part of medicine and a career that was going to be fulfilling.
Yeah, that's great. So that makes me think of two things. The first one is, when you're talking about a little adversity during the pandemic, um, as many of the people listening may know, when you put on a conference, you guarantee a certain number of rooms are going to be filled, right? And if they're not filled, then that's your responsibility per the contract to pay when you do it in a hotel. And of all things, first of all, it was obvious that the conference needed to be live canceled that year. And so the hotel said, well, you owe us all the money for all of those hotel rooms and the catering that you're not doing and so forth. And uh, for a few weeks there, we argued back and forth about whether I needed that was my responsibility or not. And force majeure, right? It was I argued that it was an act
Act
of
of God.
nature, right? And that it could not be avoided. And eventually they backed down and didn't pursue me for that. Um, but the other thing I was thinking when you were talking is um, one of the things that I do for the students that I have is when they start getting cases, let them know, send your final drafts of your reports over to me. And I will review them. I'll make suggestions to the report. I'll make comments in the margin. And you can do that when you start or through the whole course. But here's the point of the story is that your reports were absolutely outstanding from the get-go. And so when we started communicating, I think more than just being teacher and student. And the next thing that happened in this story is that you and I developed and formed Physicians Legal Consultants. And that is a company that does cases for attorneys all over the country.
That's right. It's been now about a year and a half or so, maybe a
Right.
couple years, that we've been serving attorneys kind of as this company, Physicians Legal Consultants, and it's been very rewarding and very well received. It's
Yes, absolutely. And it's been fun for us. And as physicians, this is obviously a non-clinical job. But the great thing about this non-clinical job, as opposed to many others, is that we know that we are still helping people, right?
Absolutely. I mean, when we turn in that report to our attorney, we've joked about this endlessly because we weren't the biggest essay writers, and it's always a lot of work in college and in our training when you had to write or compose essentially a literary, piece of art.
Right.
And that's really what our reports kind of end up being. And to turn that in and know the impact it's going to have on a case is extremely rewarding.
It is. When I first started, I would tell my wife I got to go write a term paper
Yes.
because that's kind of how it felt. But we know we're helping the attorney, we're helping the case, we're helping the injured person, and providing a service that just wasn't available before.
Well, Armin, I want to thank you for you gave me some really nice compliments there, and I like to mirror all of them and more. You've really been a good mentor and more help than I could have ever imagined. Really a pivotal moment in my career whenever you trained me to do this, and so thank you for that, and thank you for stimulating the concept of creating physicians legal consultants and serving all of the attorneys and their clients that we're doing now. And it's been so fun doing these podcasts now, these YouTube channel videos.
Right.
And so I just look forward to see where it goes. And if you're an attorney or a doctor listening, watching, feel free to reach out if you have a case, comments at physicianshelpingattorneys.com, or if you're interested in Armin's coaching, certainly reach out. I am a huge fan, huge cheerleader, and it really can be a total difference maker.
Great. Well, let's wish everybody happy holidays. And we'll see you on the next podcast, which will be in 2024.
We would like to thank you for tuning in to today's episode.
And we really want to help you to increase case value, save attorney time, and do it without breaking the bank.
We're really looking forward to 2024, and so go ahead and click that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you're notified of any new episodes.
And we look forward to having you on the next episode.